We're back, brothers and sisters. You're listening to the National Action Network Saturday Action Rally, coming to you live on WLIB 1190 AM, streaming to you at www.nationalactionnetwork.net, and in the 10 o'clock hour, live on the Impact Television Network. I'd like you to get on your feet right now for the president and founder of the National Action Network, the Reverend Dr. Al Sharpton.
No justice,
no peace.
No justice,
No peace.
no justice,
No peace.
no justice.
No peace.
What do we want?
Justice.
What do we want?
Justice.
What do we want?
Justice.
When do we want it?
Now.
When do we want it?
Now.
When do we want it?
Now.
Hug the person next to you, tell them you love them.
Never give up and never give in. Change your heart, keep it down the way. Trouble that triumph won't last always. With God on our side, nothing but pride. Hold on, be strong. A better day is coming and it won't be too long. Yes, change will come. Change will come. Change will come. Starting with you. Never give up and never give in. Change will come. Keep it down the way. Trouble and triumph won't last always. With God on our side, nothing but pride. Hold on, be strong. A better day is coming and it won't be too long. Yes, change will come. Change will come. Change will
National Action Network Change Choir, give them a big hand. Give them a big hand. Certainly we're happy to be with you another Saturday morning for the Saturday Action Network, for you that are here live at the House of Justice, 106 West 145th Street in the Village of Harlem. And for you that are listening live on 1190 WLIB AM in New York or watching Facebook Live, we are happy to be with you another Saturday morning where the action is. And certainly as some are ducking the snow coming in, glad for you that are here and glad for you listening at home, in your cars, or in your places of business. Give a hand to our presider, Attorney Michael Hardy, and our Northeast Regional Director, Minister Kirsten John Ford. Let me say that we dedicate this broadcast today certainly to the memory and legacy of Mrs. Latrice Sutton. Miss Sutton and Mrs. Sutton was the wife and widow of Percy Sutton. And there would not have been a National Action Network had it not been for Percy Sutton. And the entire Sutton family, and certainly Percy Sutton, who was the board president of Manhattan, when I was a little boy in Brooklyn, and he became one that supported and nurtured young folk. And when I was a teenager, he took me, paid my way and my mother's way to Black Expo in Chicago, and then to the National Black Political Convention in Gary, Indiana. I was the youngest president of the Platform Committee, all sponsored by him. And many years later, when he built Inner City, from the beginning of National Action Network, he gave us the ability to go live on the radio, as we are right now on the station he once owned. So for 26 years, we've been live on the radio every Saturday morning because of Percy Sutton. There have been many that have come and gone, many groups evolve and then dissolve. But thank God we've been able to sustain ourselves. And certainly every step of the way, Latrice Sutton was that quiet and steady hand that kept things going. She was the anchor and the strength of that family. And when I talked to Keisha, her granddaughter, who has worked with us down through the years and has carried the Sutton legacy with impeccable dignity, and she let me know her grandmother's passed. Certainly we are all given our prayers and condolences, but at the same time celebrate the life of this great woman, Latrice Sutton, and the Sutton family. We also give our celebration of the life of Dr. Jack Felder, who also passed. Many of us knew that Dr. Felder. He would from time to time visit here. Certainly one of our strong Afrocentric scholars made his transition this week, passed. And we also mourn for the family of Lowell Hawthorne, the founder and owner of Golden Crust, and we certainly keep that family in our prayers. So we lost people, but one of the things that always strikes me is that when we hear of people passing and we start nodding our head doing the ultimate ain't that something, like we ain't got a date coming. Everybody listening to me and everybody looking at me, you going to be gone sooner or later. And it ought to challenge you once when you hear someone passes. It ought to challenge you to do your work and spend your days more carefully, because it'll remind you your day is coming. Don't take getting up every morning for granted. Every day is a challenge on you fine-tuning and improving what your life will mean and what significance your life has. And you shouldn't waste the day. You know, I started doing these morning thoughts on Instagram, where every morning I get up and work out before dawn and I give a thought. Y'all that on Instagram get my thoughts. About 1,000 or so people every morning be viewing my Instagram every morning, about 5:15. And what I was saying the other morning, people ought to not assume life. People ought to use life every minute, every day. I remember the OJs used to have a song, Living for the Weekend. Well, if you living for the weekend, you ain't got much value to your life. And people just be up dancing, carrying on, living for the weekend. That's when I party down. Party hard and party down. Well, that's about all we gonna do at your funeral. Party hard and party down, because your life didn't mean nothing. So we just might as well have one big party, pour some champagne over your corpse, and send you on out there to the thing. I didn't mean to get off on that, but we celebrate Mrs. Sutton, who did not waste her life, as well as Dr. Feldman. Let me also say that we are happy Dr. Minister Foy welcomed the other night the 8 candidates for New York City Council Speaker, and that race is heating up. And I thought about the biblical expression when we talked about the people that came, but one came back. Well, I saw 8 here the other night, but one came back this morning. Corey Johnson, councilman who's running. And I've said that I want us to deal with the history of the city about never having had a black council president. But I want the best council president. I don't want just any black. And I have supported whites over blacks when the blacks wasn't right. And Corey makes it hard, because Corey got up the other night, and Corey John, let's welcome our Impact Television family nationwide, watching us all over the country. Give a hand to them. Corey was the only one that was here that had supported me for president. In fact, headed my campaign in New Hampshire. So I said, well, you know, I got to, Corey is somebody I certainly could work with. I want to see the best person win. And I want the person that'll be the fairest. So we're going to see where this goes. Let me say, last Saturday I was not here. I was in Chicago, keynoting, kicking off Founders Week, Founders Month for Reverend Jesse Jackson. And I thought, well, one of the things I try to practice what I preach, I tell the young folks around in NAN to respect the lineage and respect the mentors that paved the way for you. And with Reverend Jackson's announcement of Parkinson's, I wanted to be there to keynote his kickoff for his Founders Month, because I grew up under Reverend Jackson and Reverend Jones. And many people do not understand that one of the things that they're trying to do is destabilize the history of our people. So if you are destabilized in terms of how we got where we are, you will not know how to go back and do what it is that needs to be done. One of the things that keeps coming to me over and over again, makes it real plain, is that many of us have the passion and commitment and really want to do something, but we don't know what to do because we've not studied what has worked in the past, and we've not really understood the formulas that led to progress. So passion and emotion without strategy and a plan will lead to nothing. That's why a lot of us just get despondent and saying nothing happening because we did not plan for something to happen. I ask people all the time, well, Remal, so-and-so happened. Okay, what are we going to do about it? We're going out there and do so-and-so. Well, how will that lead to dealing with the problem? You got to think that through. Well, one of the best ways of thinking things through is to see what has worked in the past. What worked, what didn't work. You know, I grew up, I always tell y'all, I had a single mother and one sister. Now, if the stove got hot and my sister touched the stove and jerked her finger, got burned, I did not have to test it. I could take her word for it. Hello. If I saw the scar on her hand, that's enough for me. I didn't say I want my own scar. What is my point? If some things don't work, then there is no reason to duplicate it. So some stuff y'all don't see me get in is because I know that don't work. We tried that before. And I know some things that do work. Building alliances with a respect for each other's interests works. Sitting up in the corner pouting, screaming, and mad does not work. They do not care you're mad. They care that we organize. Look at what's going on in South Alabama and Mississippi today. President Donald Trump goes to Pensacola, Florida. I want y'all to watch this now. Very shrewd. First, he had opposed in the Republican runoff Roy Moore. Then he came back now and started slow walking, supporting Roy Moore. Then he came out blatantly and started tweeting, "We need Roy Moore. Vote for Roy Moore." Fact that 8 people have accused Moore of pedophilia. We ain't talking about whether or not he said something that's a gray area and whether or not it could be disputed. 8 women have said that he had went after them in an improper way while they were underage. So bad that he was banned from his local mall. Y'all imagine that? Y'all imagine living in Brooklyn and you the judge and they tell you you can't come to King's Plaza because you keep messing with the little girls. I think I'll bring it home for you to understand. That's who they running for the U.S. Senate. On top of that, they come out with a tape the other day in which he was asked at a public forum in August, "Make America Great Again." When Judge Moore was the America great before? When's the last time America was great? He said, well, during slavery, yeah, we had the race issue, but we all got along. Our families got along. So his reference point for a great time in America was during slavery. This is his answer on videotape. Despite the blatant racism, first of all, we didn't have families getting along in slavery. We were owned by families. And it was against the law for us to have a family. You couldn't name your children after you. They had to be named after the master. You couldn't legally marry your wife. What families? But for him to do that only complements and parallels. They're supporting the erection and the upholding of Confederate statues. Don't forget now, Trump said, this is our heritage, this is our history. So they celebrate the Confederacy, see greatness in slavery. He comes in, Trump, be very shrewd. Don't go in Alabama, he goes to Pensacola, Florida, 20 miles on the other side of the Alabama border, because it's the same media market. So one of the reasons they get angry with me, they say, Sharpton manipulates the media. No, if you are one type person, Corey Johnson, you are media savvy. If you me, you slick. No, I understand media markets, because I'm trying to get my message out just like Trump and them get theirs out. He went to Pensacola because he didn't have to go to Alabama. It's the media market for Eastern Alabama. And rallied last night for the man that I just described with the pedophilia and the racism. Today, he's going to the opening of the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum. John Lewis and the congressman there, Benny Thompson, are not going. Now, the issue for me is, first of all, Donald Trump is against everything that you celebrating in the museum. How you gonna spend the year denouncing protesters and then go see a museum of protest? How you gonna spend the year saying that we gonna pull the police back away from reform, but you gonna go in a museum that talks about equal protection under the law? How you going in a museum that's got to talk about Emmett Till, who was killed in Mississippi, but you're doing nothing about racial violence as President of the United States? He advocates taking Confederate statues out of museums and putting them on the public display, and putting our voting rights and our civil rights and our police reform in a museum. The biggest and most blatant example of hypocrisy is for Donald Trump, who symbolizes a northern urban version of most of what they had to fight for and fight against in Mississippi, attending a museum like he needs somebody to tell him a story that he himself is reinforcing and supporting in a northern version. What we do not have the proper understanding of is that the bigotry and the sexism and the homophobia that we see in the South is also dressed up in the North. We just think because folk don't have on overalls and chewing tobacco, that's different. They wear pinstripe banker suits and get their hair done and get manicures up here, but it's the same kind of bigotry. Y'all deal with manicured racists. Well-mannered racist. Urbanized racist. Still a racist. Well, Reverend, that's kind of harsh. Well, 1986, when Michael Griffith was killed, run over the Belt Parkway for being in Howard Beach. And I and others went out and marched in Howard Beach to show this was not some accident. They came out by the hundreds and threw watermelons at us and called us the N-word. We marched. They said, this is our neighborhood, get the ends out publicly. That's when I first started getting a lot of recognition, 86. But what they won't talk about is not far from Howard Beach, up the road about a mile, is Jamaica Estates, where Donald Trump was born and raised and is older than me. He was not out there protesting with us. He grew up in New York, where there were segments of the city it was known blacks couldn't go. He got to go to the museum, go home. Ride with us through Howard Beach and see if in 10 minutes we wouldn't be at your boyhood house. You can't lecture Mississippi when you lived up south and did nothing about it. When you and your father had to defend themselves against housing discrimination based on race. I want y'all to get this watching cross country. Donald Trump and his daddy were defending a housing discrimination lawsuit based on race while I was marching in Howard Beach and Bensonhurst. We were marching against segregation while they were being charged with segregation. But they won't bring that up. Now, why won't they discuss that, Michael Hardy? Well, first of all, let me tell you something. I laid this out last week in Chicago, Reverend Jackson's thing. When Dr. King left the South, they won the Voting Rights Act 65, won the Civil Rights Act in 64. People said, well, Dr. King, you did great jobs in the South, but this won't work national. He went north and said, we're going to deal with voter registration in Cleveland and open housing in Chicago and education. When he went to Chicago, they marched outside Chicago at Marquette Park and Cicero. And they came out just like Howard Beach and started throwing bricks and using the N-word and hit Dr. King in the head with a brick. Not in Mississippi, not in Birmingham, in Marquette Park, Illinois. Dr. King said at the end of the march that the folk in the North need to teach the folk in the South how to be racist. This is the most racist stuff I've ever seen. He said the hardest march I ever went on was this march. Now, I want y'all to follow this real carefully. Rachel Noling is here, the media wizard. Why do we always see the horrific beatings on the Selma Bridge that reminds us of the pain we went through in Alabama? Hosea Williams, John Lewis. But we never see the horrific brick that hit Dr. King in Marquette Park, Illinois. Because the North does not want to show that they were just as bad as the South. And the Northern liberals own and control the media. So if you control the story, then you control what comes out of the story. I want to welcome to the stage a good friend of mine, come by to have a word in the two. Award-winning actor Danny Glover's in the house. Danny Glover. As long as they controlled the story. So that's why you got to be real careful, do your own research. The Northern liberal media demonized racism in the South, but would not tell the stories in the North. So they never talk about Dr. King got stoned in Chicago. But they'll go down south and talk about Uncle Bubba, what he did. And both of them was wrong. One of the reasons why we were always controversial in the media is because we were fighting northern racists. So we marched Howard Beach, we marched Bensonhurst, all the way up to Trayvon and all that. Well, Sharpton was controversial because we didn't have good manners, because we were fighting those that became the Trumps of the world. Trump lived right down the road when we was marching. To call them racist, you're divisive. But they were willing to give that to the Southerners. That's why, Corey, if we deal with alliances and deal with the fact that the same homophobes in the South is the same homophobia in the North, and on and on and on, we will find out that we've got to deal with these things in a strategic, collective way. That's right. I talked earlier about Mrs. Sutton passing. I did the eulogy at Percy Sutton's funeral. And one of the things I talked about is how a reporter said to me once, you know, Rem Al, y'all keep talking this civil rights stuff for years in and out. I done heard it since Dr. King's day. It's the same thing. Y'all keep talking about bigotry, and you keep talking about what is unfair and unjust and what is proportionally inadequate. And I said, you know, let me ask you this way. There was this guy that had a test in his class. He was the best student in the class, Rachel. Got ready to, at the end of the term, the assignment was everybody should write an essay on their favorite pet. Peter was the best student in the class and a master essayist. And he sat down and he wrote this beautiful essay. Got up next morning, worked on it again. 2 or 3 days, he just perfected it because at the end of the term, he really wanted to impress the teacher. Handed it in. Teacher took all of the papers, graded them 3 or 4 days. At the end of the next week, teacher was giving out the papers, and he got his papers to his surprise. His best essay, top student, he got an F. Failed. He was stunned. He was rattled. He asked the teacher, could he see her after class? And she said, sure. Class was over. He waited everybody to leave the classroom. He went to her. He said, I can't understand this. I'm your best student. I'm also your best writer. I worked on this essay in more detail and more focus than any that I've done. And you failed me. How could I have failed? She said, oh no, it was beautifully written. It was very well done. But you have one problem, Peter. I had your brother. And, you know, I've been teaching him 15 years. Your brother was my student 3 years ago. And he wrote an essay on the same assignment. And you and he sounded almost alike. He started smiling because she thought he'd plagiarized the essay off his brother. He said, Madam Teacher, in all due respect, I'm not a plagiarist. And I didn't copy my brother's essay. The problem is that me and my brother had the same dog. And we're describing the same pet. So what I said to this reporter, if we sound like Dr. King and sound like others, is we fighting the same dog that they have. You're asking me to change my speech when I'm talking about the same dog. That's why I say this thing is generation. Last Saturday I wasn't here. I was out Saturday in Chicago with Reverend Jackson. I grew up in the tradition of I come out of the King movement. I was Jesse's youth director, on into me. Got young folk under me now. There are many traditions. One of the things I respect about this brother is Danny Glover has come not only as a star in his own right, but as a social activist and a political leader. He represents a tradition from Paul Robeson to Harry Belafonte to Danny Glover and teaching those coming behind. If you're not connected to something, then you are not something that will sustain itself. Keep telling young folk, a branch is not in and of itself much if the season change. The strength of a tree is not its branches, but its roots. If you want to get through the winter, you better be connected to a root. Roots run underground. Branches go with the snow in the day. Ain't no leaves out there. Leaves was pretty, beautiful. Look at those pretty leaves, gone. But the roots are still there. And this brother is rooted and grounded in our movement. I bring you Al Robeson, Al Belafonte, Danny Glover. Give us a few more.
Thank you for those very generous words, and I applaud all of you. As it's early in the morning still, you up here listening to the righteous Reverend here, and I'm just thinking about rootedness and everything. I just came back. I think I flew up here from Georgia. I was in my mother's hometown, Louisville, Georgia, and I've gone there since I was 6 months old. Wow. 6 months old, I've gone there. I was born and raised in San Francisco, but my mother was so rooted in where she'd come from, what she had come out of. And she had come out of the fields, Georgia, come her mother. My grandmother was born, my grandmother was born in 1895. My father's grandmother, my grandfather's, this is my maternal side, my grandfather's mother, Mary Brown, the family matriarch, was born in 1853, which means that she was freed by the Emancipation Proclamation. I had a chance, since I've been going down there since I was 6 months old, to remember her, the images of her, the feeling of her energy of there, the energy that she brought. She was a healer. She died in 1950, which means I was 4 years old. So I had seen her. And so when I feel rooted, I don't go back to just my parents, my mother and father. I go right back to Mary Brown and rooted in that. And it's funny when you go down there, you talk about things. And I have a 95-year-old cousin, my mother's first cousin, Fanny Houston, and a 100-year-old first cousin of my mother, Rosalie. And I was talking to her, driving around with her, a little small town, Louisville, Georgia, Rennes, whoever's from there would know that part of Jefferson County. And I was talking to her, and she mentioned something about Galilee, the church that they grew up in. Went to school first, went to public school. And I'm saying all this because I'm learning all the time and listening all the time to her. And she mentioned something about when she talked about Galilee, she talked about how my grandparents had lived back in the woods until they bought a farm in the early 40s. A farm that that's still in our family's hand. The farm is still in our family's hand. And then she mentioned something about Galilee. I said, when did Galilee when did they build Galilee on the highway? And she said, that's not the first Galilee. The first Galilee was back in the woods, where they call it a bush harbor. Anybody ever heard the word bush harbor before? From somewhere, bush harbor, you know what I'm talking about. That means that black people couldn't build a church, so they have an open space back in the backwoods, and my grandparents lived back there first before they had that, before they got the farm. And I'm saying all this about the idea of Reverend saying that I'm rooted. So even though I was born in San Francisco, the main, how would you say, emphasis of around my life, even in San Francisco, was my mother's relationship with her family and extended family in Georgia. So the sermon given to me often, and all 4 or 5 of us, was that my mother would say, I'd be eternally grateful for my mother and father because I didn't pick cotton in September. I went to school in September. So it had to be some sacrifices made for her to go to school in September and her brothers go. Consequently, she was graduated from Payne College, and you know Payne College in Augusta, Georgia in 1942. And at the time, she ended up being the regional president of the National Council of Negro Women in San Francisco. That's all of what I come out of, in the sense that, even the sense of feeling as a young student, as a child of the Civil Rights Movement, and I unabashedly say I am a child of the Civil Rights Movement. I remember the Montgomery bus boycott as a child. I remember Brown versus Board of Education. All those things were filtered through me in San Francisco as well. And to have the opportunity to carry on that. I worked in city government for 6.5 years before I decided I wanted to be an actor. I worked in the Model Cities program in the Office of Community Development. All of you heard of those symbols all before. I worked in that in the early 70s and the thing. But what I always felt was critical is the importance of citizenship and the activism that's generated and created through citizenship. Ordinary people just doing extraordinary things in their lives and changing the landscape, of fighting to change the landscape. I've been involved for almost a year with an organization, a company, which is trying to change the landscape, and that's Airbnb. My responsibility is to bring more people of color into this expanding cycle of business around tourism. You know, people traveling. And in the course of doing that, talking to men and women here in Harlem, in Bed-Stuy, talking to people as well in San Francisco, even Toronto, and also Vancouver, there's a sense that not only do people derive from their relationship as being hosts, simply hosts, financial gains, but there are all other kind of gains that they also derive from that relationship as well. And the stories that I've had, we are a composition of our stories. The stories that I hear from them has made me feel that this is something worthwhile and encouraging for people to get engaged and involved in. Home sharing, in a sense. We do it all the time. You know, we home share all the time. You know, we home share, when we have a big family reunion. You know, we're piling everybody up and everybody and everything else. We're home sharing is something that we always did. You know, and even to the point, during the deep crisis around in segregate moments of segregation, where did people go when they go down south? They didn't stay at the big hotels. What did they stay? They stayed at somebody's house. Musicians there, artists came around. They stayed in those houses in their community. And the extraordinary thing is that this is something that is here, and it can be used as a facilitator in building and growing the sense of community and expanding the sense of community and our relationship to each other. And like I say, the stories have been amazing for me. Stories where people who might have lost their house because of gentrification. And we know what gentrification is doing right here in Harlem too. You're right here in Harlem, not only here, but we know the role that gentrification has played. But they've been able to make enough income not only to stay in that neighborhood, continue to grow their roots in that neighborhood, and at the same time have a little money to help their child through college or something like that. So there's so many benefits there. So I'm here, even though I'm talking on the Reverend show right now, I'm here to talk about those things, to hear what those who become hosts, and to talk about what are some of the obstacles, what are some of the things that they've encountered while they were as hosts, and how they can work on bettering Airbnb so that it facilitates the ideas that I think are important, and I'm sure you think are important, of community and community sustainability. When I think about what has happened in this whole period, I've lived in San Francisco. I've lived in San Francisco the most of my life outside of you living in New York here when I did theaters in the late 70s and early 80s. And I've watched that city, my city that I grew up in. I live in the same neighborhood that I've lived in since I was 11 years old. I live 12 blocks from where I grew up right now, today. And when I've watched what is happening to that city, when people have been pushed out of the city, pushed out of their homes because of the changing economic dynamics that are happening in urban areas all over this country. I don't care whether it's Chicago, I don't care if it's Cincinnati, with Over the Rhine. You know, those people know Cincinnati, Over the Rhine, which would be a black community. I don't care if it's in Oakland, California, New York, everywhere we go. Poor people who pushed out on the margin, and invariably they're people of color who pushed out on the margin and pushed out of their homes. So if this could be a facilitator and people staying in their homes, continue to manifest their relationships within their community and enhance the community and community small businesses as well, then something is happening there. But at the same time, we have the capability of being the architects in this whole process as well. As I would always say, the architects in our own rescue as well. So we have the possibility of being part and shaping this in a way and being active as citizens in the shaping of that. Now, there are going to be forces that we're going to have to counter with. Of course, the hotel business doesn't want to see any democratization of the whole tourist industry. They're making vast profits as it is right now. In terms of, you know that, because here in New York itself, wherever you are, it's a major, major place to go for vacationers and those. So on the one hand, at the same time, we're going to have to oppose those forces. And they are political forces as well. Because on the if we deem that these are the things that are necessary for our existence and coexistence among each other, these are the things we should do, then we're going to have to fight for those as well and stand up for those as well. And make sure that those elected officials not just bow down to the needs of those big, large hotel corporations, etc., but also respect their constituency and respect our needs as well. That's important. And that's all about being a citizen. It's all about being a citizen. It's all about finding a way in which our voice becomes at the center of the decisions that are made that affect our lives and affect our communities. I thought when I was going to be here, I was going to be interviewed on the Reverend Show. I seem like I'm giving some sort of problem, but nonetheless, I'm happy that I'm here. I'm certainly that the work that the Action Network does is important, essential work, and to have you out here, right here, listening, bringing your young ones at a time before you get your day going, listening and going, knowing that this is valuable information that you need, a valuable tool that you need to go on and continue to build this community and be the citizens that you know that you have to be and are capable of being. Thank you so much.
Give him a hand, Danny Glover. And let me acknowledge Janae Ingram. Come back up here. Janae, who worked with us, was our executive director, and she is now working. We're proud of her as she is, wherever she goes, she's now a big shot at Airbnb. And she was one of the organizers and over logistics for the Women's March in January. But wherever she goes, she talks about National Action Network and represents, and we're proud of her growth, her leadership, and the Martin Luther King Breakfast in Washington. The staff there who worked under her in the Washington Bureau has nominated her, and we're honoring her on Martin Luther King Day Breakfast in the Washington, D.C. office. Janae Ingram. All right. Glad to see her. See, that's why I tell you, ain't no telling who gonna come by the Action Rally on Saturday in Harlem. You need to be up in the house, because even in the snow, ain't no telling who's gonna be here. And as Danny Glover was telling us about his relatives and about how he found out that his great-grandmother was born and at the time of the Emancipation Proclamation. I was looking at some of us here that can't go back through our family tree. And the reason why it is important to do that is that it personalizes what we've been through. And it makes you understand this is not somebody else's story. This is your story. A lot of us try to deal with it in the abstract. But this is your story. And you must embrace it as your story. When you realize, that's why I tell people all the time, it is good to sit up and read the scriptures. It is good to know what God had done down through the ages. But the best testimony that I have is what God done for me. I was reading in the media this morning where the Pope is saying that the interpretation of lead us not into temptation might give us power not to have temptation or to yield to temptation. But he's trying to interpret it differently. Well, I don't know. They might have got some interpretations differently on Job's story. Or they might have got some interpretation differently on Jeremiah's story. Or they might have got in translation differences on the stories of the woes of Gideon. But one thing I'm sure about is my story. Whether they switch up on Job or not, I know what God done for me. One of the things that I really want us to focus on in the coming weeks, on Thursday the 14th, we're giving out free turkeys here as we prepare for Christmas. I want us to focus on our work is not judged by our pats on the back. Our work is judged by what we do when we don't get pats on the back. Many of us think that we have this new phenomenon of Facebook leaders. Social media leaders, where you judge your effectiveness by how many people are following you on social media, rather than judging your effectiveness by the work you do. I'd rather feed 800 people here on the 14th and feed hot meals on Christmas than to have 800 likes on Facebook. Because at the end of it all, your work will speak for you. And what I want you to do, Attorney Hardy and Minister Foy and I went this week and met with the ambassador at the UN mission of Libya. And we wanted to have firsthand on what is going on with the slave auctions that came off this CNN tape. And he was saying, well, we're investigating it. It's not the government. There may be some criminal elements. And we said, whatever it is, we want to know what it is, and we want to possibly have a group led by me to go over there. Reverend Jackson said he would go with us to check it out. Why? Because the thought to me of anybody being sold in the 21st century, how can you stand up preaching about what God did for the Israelites and ignore what's going on in Libya and Mauritania today? God is still on the throne, but are you bowing to that throne? Don't tell me what God did, tell me what he still does. So whether it's Libya, whether it's dealing with voting rights, whether it's dealing with women rights, whether it's dealing with LGBTQ rights, you have got to stand up in your time. You are not going to be judged in the judgment on how well you knew what God did for others, You'll be judged on what you allowed God to use you to do. We used to talk about when I was growing up in the church, one day you're going to the judgment. Well, if you go to the judgment, what you gonna say? Call your name. You lived such years. God bless you, brought you through. What did you do with your life? Well, you know what Moses, no, I asked you about Moses. He already been through. Well, let me tell you about St. Luke. Luke done passed. He's already up there. Talking about you. What you gonna say? You alive. When Trump tried to take health care from 23 million people that needed it, what you do? You alive. When children were being locked up in your community with disproportionate sentences so that those in the prison business could make money, what did you do? You alive. When there were people sleeping homeless in the snow in your cities, and you drove by them singing your hymn, If I Can Help Somebody, and pull off at the red light, what you gonna do? You are gonna be judged by what you do. God didn't bless you for you, he blessed you to bless others. He kept you so you could be of service to him. And that's why when I look back over my life and think of all the things God brought me through, he brought me through for a reason. He didn't bring me through to be posing up in a mirror talking about, look what I've been through. He said, I delivered you so you would be here to help. Keep the word going. And I don't care if nobody don't stand up to Trump. I got to stand up. I don't care if nobody cry loud. I got to cry loud. That's why when a young lady, I'll let you go on this young lady named Esther, found herself taken up in the king's house. He brought her there for one reason. He brought her there because she was beautiful and she pleasing to the eye. But she was the niece of a prophet called Mordecai. And let me tell you something different between what prophets see and what average folks see. And Mordecai didn't give a pass. A lot of y'all give folk a pass. That's my niece up in the king's house. Up there with the boss. Ain't that she fine? Mordecai said, don't forget, your people are being slated to be destroyed. There's a plan to wipe them out. And you need to tell the king about the plan. She said, well, it's against protocol. It's against rules. We're there to entertain them. We're not supposed to talk about policy. We're not supposed to discuss what's going on. And Mordecai looked at her and said, maybe you have come for such a time as this. Sometimes you got to break protocol. Sometimes at the time you're in, you got to break what is proper. Maybe we've come for such a time as this. And Esther said, I tell you what, Uncle Mordecai, I'm rooted in it. I can't sleep at night. I can't forget. It's in my DNA. I'm going to fast 3 days. I'm going to turn it on my plate. I'm going to get all this toxic out my system and ask God to give me guidance. And after she prayed 3 days and after she got the poisons out of mine, a lot of y'all put poison in your body and in your spirit. After she purified herself, she decided to go to the king on behalf of people, rooted in what her Uncle Mordecai said. And let me tell you something, you ain't not going to make history till you get to this point. You're not going to make a difference till you get to this point. Somebody said, Esther, you can't do this now. It's against protocol. They're going to throw you out the kingdom. They may throw you in jail. And when you face that moment, that's when you know what you're made out of. Esther said, I made up my mind, if I perish, let me perish. But I'm going to see the king. I don't know what lies ahead. I don't know how we gonna turn this nation around. I don't know how we gonna keep the struggle going. All I know is if I perish, let me perish. But there is a God that brought us this far. A God that opens Red Seas. A God that divides Jordan rivers. And I don't believe he brought me this far to leave me now. Stand up, black man. Stand up, black woman. Stand on his promises. Stand on his commitment. He promised never to leave us alone. Everybody say, everybody say, someone here today that attends the rallies, listens to us on radio, watches us on television, but never became a part of the National Action Network. If you're here today and want to be a member, be part of what we do, join one of our clubs, just come down to me right now and let me sign you up to the National Action Network. Come on, everybody singing. Everybody sing. Everybody singing. Yeah, sing it like you mean it. Sing it like you mean it. Sing it like you mean it. We want justice. Justice. We want justice. All right. We'll raise our offering. Go raise the offering, moving quickly. Raise our offering. I want everyone to give to the best of their ability. We need volunteers that will help on the 14th. turkeys, you that will help us should sign in at the counter. McCall, y'all got someone at the counter for the lid. That you will help us pass out the turkeys on the 14th, Patrice. And then I need a bunch of volunteers for Christmas Day. We're gonna feed the homeless and seniors all day Christmas Day, 25th. I listened to Danny Glover talking about his grandmother and Emancipation Day. We're gonna see if we can get Attorney Hardy to tell us how it felt the night they heard about emancipation. Must have been a great day. All right, let us give the best of our ability. I need about 10 people that give $100 or more. Come quickly. I need about 10 people. Come quickly. Guardians, $100. Brother Corey Weiss, $100. Come on, I need some more hundreds. Sister Cynthia, $100. Come on, come on, come on. Give me some 50s, $50, $50, 50. Alvin Ponder, $50. Brother John, $50. Brother Mallory, $50. Membership, $50. 20s. Gwen Carr, $20. Corey Johnson. Now everybody, whatever you have, $1, $5, $10, come on. Whatever you have.